Well, greetings all. Lots of questions in tonight. We might not get through them all. If we don't panic. We'll get them with the next round, which is only a few weeks away. So if it is critical, let me know. We can set up a time where I'll discuss it one-on-one with you in the meantime. But if it's not critical, just bear with us. I don't want to go much over an hour and a half tonight. So if we can do that, that would be good. Okay, so lots of great questions, and so we'll start off with the ones that we've received in writing first. And of course, I just did the dumb thing and closed down my email account. So I will share with you what I've got, and share. Infinite screen. And there it goes, telling me not to do that. That's okay. Okay, tonight's questions. I'll go down and I'll do them from those that came in first rather than the other way around. That way those that have got their questions in early get them answered quicker. Okay, Vicky, are you online? Is Vicky there?
I think so.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I'm here. I just don't know what's going on with my camera today.
That's okay. We don't need to see each other. You certainly don't want to see me, but
I think AI is taking it over, trying to take me over.
Oh, AI is so much fun. Okay. Issue 1, roots circling Gladicia tricanthos above the root crown. Roots are also coming up through the concrete floor of a garden shed 3 meters away. Would circling roots be the result of a changed irrigation program, shallow and frequent watering? My first guess for girdling roots is nursery practices. They're the first culprit. So if it's not nursery practice, you know, if it's quite a big area, the next reason we get it is volcano mulching. And by volcano mulching, we mean a small amount of mulch very close into the tree. And there's been work that shows that that will encourage roots to start growing, and they'll grow in the environment that's good, which is going to be always in this circular motion. So when we're mulching, I say this all the time, you want to have at least 1 meter, preferably more of mulch around a tree. And that's been shown to get rid of that girdling roots. Yes, they may girdle when the tree's 4 meters in diameter. If it does, I'm not going to get sued. I'll be dead. You'll be dead. We don't have to worry about that. Girdling roots naturally occur anyhow. What we don't want to do is stimulate them. So that's what I would do. The root in the concrete floor in the garden shed 3 meters away. It's a Gladicia. It'll probably want to shoot up a few more times. There is a sucker stopping or inhibiting chemical available in the US. I'm sure if you go onto Amazon, you could probably find it, or eBay or one of those things. It's just not licensed for that use in Australia, unfortunately. You can figure out the rest of that story. So that's that one. Next one. The science behind the root loss calculator. Yeah, very simple. We know we can lose 1/3 of the roots of a tree without the tree becoming unstable. So we can lose 1/3 of the first order roots. We know that because we can get a basal cavity, and a basal cavity results in the loss of all the roots on that 1/3. If we're talking about 1/3 basal cavity. And the research shows us that trees with 1/3 basal cavities aren't substantially more likely to fail. So stability is covered by the 1/3. Next thing is, how about the amount of root loss? Well, we can well and truly take out more than 1/3 of the roots of a tree. We do that every time we transplant one. So 1/3 is where the limit's set. And all that we did, Vicky, was we looked for some research. There's a paper. If you can get access to the calculator, a copy of the paper should be there. We looked at some research that showed us what percentage of the biomass of a tree on average was roots, what percentage was not roots. We understood there's a fair variation in that. We took a low value, so 21%. Obviously, if you've got half the thing underground, then we've got less problems, not more. So we took the lower end range and we said 21%, and then we used allometry, and all that allometry is measure one part, get the whole. So we know, for example, that Mark has an obesity issue, because if we look at the body mass index, which is height times weight, we see, yep, Mark is in the obese section. So that's allometry in practicality. Allometry is used in forestry measurements all the time. Lots of things you can work from allometry. You can work out the leaf area. You can work out ratios of all sorts by playing around with that process. So very much a simple process. So if you need more than that, Vicky, let me know. But it's a simple, basic concept. And what it does is it takes what we've done historically, which is the exploration side, finding the roots, getting some measurements. And the bit that was left unanswered is, well, now we've got that information, how do we make a decision? And the root loss calculator gives us a way of doing that that's got scientific basis. Is it perfectly precise? No, it's not. One of our mentors, Jonathan, I think, started to come on once. Jonathan found a cashmere cypress that just had more than 50% of its root system below ground, just massive quantity of roots. Why? Trees are variable. When I was down at almost no body fat, when I was doing lots of cycling and weightlifting, I was still over the obese level using the body mass index. So I was going to be in that category regardless, and that's just because that's an average. There are going to be variations or deviations from that line. And that's why when we do scientific experiments, we often have to allow for the fact that two things aren't the same. We what we might treat one tree with, we could say, look, that's what Eucalyptus camaldulensis is like, and we could say that's true, but it's not true for 100% of the population of Eucalyptus camaldulensis. There'll be variation within even in that population, and so we've just got to keep that in mind. So what we say is you can probably go more than 1/3. Hamilton says 50%. We've cut back from that and said 1/3 is probably fairly realistic. Now we have had the data checked. Benson, Andrew Benson, checked the stuff that he did in Christchurch, and looked recently at putting that data through the root loss calculator, and he found that the calculator in terms of biomass was somewhat reliable. It plotted along a straight line. So we're in the ballpark. It's not about precision, it's about reducing uncertainty. What we've had previously was a process where we'd say, I've examined the roots, now I don't know. And somebody wakes up and they say, well, I had this strange feeling in my stomach that said that wouldn't work. Well, that's not the way we make decisions as scientists. We need to at least have some basis. What I suspect is, and I made it clear in that document, is that in time, we'll get increased precision. That's the aim, is to become more and more precise. So over time, there'll be more research, more data, and we'll get more accurate.
Yeah, because I used it for the Land Environment Court and it was accepted, but I've had another council arborist who didn't know about it ask me about it, and I couldn't explain it well enough. I gave it information, but yeah. Yeah,
look, when you get a chance, Vicky and we're together, I'm happy to run over it in a lot more detail, but it's fairly simple maths. That's from my perspective. From, I don't know, from Peter's perspective, Peter will say, oh, well, that's not simple at all. But it's not so complex that a high school student doing 3-unit maths would have troubles doing it.
Can I just clarify the Gladitsia with this client? Do I go back to him? Can he use a root barrier around his garden shed or not? He's got to find the chemical.
No. He could sever that one root. I'd wait until autumn time and sever the root manually if you can find that one root.
Yeah.
Did you see a message from David, Mark?
I've seen that message, yeah.
Sorry, what's the message say, Peter?
David's saying that there is a product available.
Is there? Good? I know Root Stopper is available in the US. Again, I'm not familiar with the things. I know that those of you in Victoria can pretty well do whatever you like if you've got insurance and efficacy data. In New South Wales, we're a lot more controlled, so we've got to wait for it to be registered here. And it may well be. I've got some sitting on my shelf, but it probably was more out of trial and interest rather than anything else.
Okay.
David, if you've got it, you might just put in the name for that as well.
Yes, he did. I'm not sure where that message has gone. Maybe you could put it up
I
again.
can see it.
Oh, you can see it?
I can see it.
It was through a local stock and station agent in Mansfield, Victoria, Nutrient Ag Solution. Yeah, they called it Sucker Stopper, and they had a bottle of it on the shelf, but I never bought it. So
yeah, that's good. Yeah, look, it's a viable product. Again, the efficacy data shows that it's of benefit. It's not perfect, but and again, as I said, Victoria is a little bit different than New South Wales. I don't know whether it's registered for use in Australia as yet, but I said Victoria, Queensland have slightly different rules than other states, and Vic is definitely in New South Wales, and we are definitely required to follow the label and not use a product contrary to the label. And if it's not labeled, then it's not approved. So that's that one. Okay. Let me duck across and get the next one. Where the hell was that, Peter? That was Wednesday, was it? Okay. Andy. Andy's there somewhere.
Yep.
Hi, Andy.
Hello.
Root grafting. Oh, yes, it's a real problem. It's a real problem in the sense that it is a very real issue. Many years ago, there were a number of large settlements where somebody poisoned a tree they'd taken down, and root grafting took the herbicide up into an adjacent tree. In fact, there was a site in the North Shore where 6 trees were killed by the result of poisoning the stump of one adjacent tree. And a part of the reason why that is we tend, when we poison trees, to like cut nice grooves or drill holes and use lots of chemical, more chemical than we would otherwise need to kill the tree. And so where roots graft, where you get this natural process in inoculation, then it's transferred from one tree to the other. So the advantage of poisoning before you cut the tree down is you reduce the risk of that reverse flow that is going from the stump to the surrounding trees. And the reason for that, Andy, is trees suck. In a real nice sense of it. They take water up, and so there's this negative pressure, a pull, a vacuum, a sucking upwards of things. When that vacuum or that sucking up is taken away, that negative pressure, then the negative pressure at the other end will pull it through the roots. And you end up getting to the root system of the other tree, which is not what you're wanting to affect. So whenever you see something that's in the same genera, the recommendation is do not poison if you don't want the surrounding trees to be affected. So that's, now having said that, camphor laurels are incredibly resilient plants. So I've got a beautiful sample here in my collection of a camphor laurel that is poisoned about every 150 mils or so, injected. You can see where it died back. Little columns of live tissue remained, and then eventually it completely occluded and recovered from the poisoning event. So poisoning does not always mean death with camphor laurels, and that's been one of the issues that people find. They've got so much parenchyma, so effective at compartmentalization and isolating things, that they look at poisoning and say, well, that wasn't overly effective, was it? And so with camphor laurel, bamboo is much the same. Running bamboo, Phyllostachys, we say, look, every 3 to 6 months you're back there and doing it until you get a couple of inspections without any new growth. And camphor laurel stumps, I've had them cut down, ground, and had them suffer up. Yes, Michael.
Mark, when the herbicide is travelling through the tree, like you said, poison it when it's still standing, is it travelling up the tree in the xylem? And when the tree's cut down, is it travelling in the phloem to the root system?
That's a really good question, Mick. I don't know the answer. Maybe that's something I can go through over the next week or so. Peter, would you mind sending me an email? Part of the problem is we're talking about predominantly use of Roundup glyphosate. There's a lot of the earlier literature was not quite accurate, if I can say that without getting into trouble for saying things about glyphosate. It's a great chemical, but there was a misunderstanding of what was happening. So, and lots of chemicals stop at the phloem barrier. So getting them up to the lamina is easy, but getting them down is difficult. Not much travels down the other way, that is down through the xylem. We can get sugars and other things going up through the xylem, but nothing largely comes down. Most of it comes down the phloem. So I'm assuming there's a phloem transfer process, but I've never looked that up. So I think that's a wonderful question. Maybe it's something like
deciduous trees. Sorry, for deciduous trees, for them to bud, are the sugars travelling up the reverse way in the phloem?
No, and yes. So sugar transfer is active controlled. So there's a chemical pressure created rather than a physical pressure. And trees do it in different ways. So for example, maples like sending sugar up in their xylem. They take it and use amylase, break down the starch and put it in as sucrose or glucose into the xylem, into the dead system, the apoplastic system, and it's moved up through the tree. That's why we can tap and get maple syrup. On the other hand, lots of trees control that very positively. So you can try tapping an oak and you won't get much at all, but you'll get sweet gum, for example, liquid amber. You can tap liquid amber. You can get sugars taken up in that early springtime. So different trees behave differently. I don't know whether all trees have a short burst of sugar uptake or not, but given that we only tap maples, it seems to me that some would do it at a very different rate than others. And if you're talking about something like eucalypt, of course, it's not going to happen at all. Most of the starting of the leaf burst and the take up of water in late winter, early spring is to do with, again, stored starches up the top of the tree being depolymerized, breaking apart very quickly. And that causes that initial suction for springtime, for leaf burst. So why do some things do it one way and one things do it the other way? I have no idea. It's just the way that life is. And I don't know. Another good question again. I don't know whether there's been any broad scale research on what proportion of the sugars in what genre go up in different ways.
Thanks, Mark.
What I know about poisoning camphors is that applying the chemical to the xylem does appear to be effective.
It doesn't, no. Look, diluting things, dose is critical. I won't tell the normal joke I tell with dose is critical, but dose is critical. And a really good example of that is we have here in Sydney a lovely little black spider called the Sydney funnel-web spider, Atrax robustus, and it's killed a few people in its days. It's quite a nasty thing. And when I was a kid, I would watch them get the metathorax, the back bit taken off from the abdomen. The front bit's metathorax, the abdomen pulled off, and the puppies would eat the abdomen. And I think those puppies must be so quick to avoid getting bitten. What I didn't know is that the toxin is really toxic to primates. Things like rabbits and cats and dogs, less effective. Things like mice starts to become effective. So that, slight changes in biochemistry and slight changes in dosing rates has a huge influence. The same bite won't kill a dog, that'll kill a human being. So, and the reason why we have these instructions on products is because they've done trials, they've done work to say how well do they do the job. So that's something to keep in mind. Okay, so yes, follow the instructions as far as possible. I know down here in Sydney now, we're typically poisoning camphor laurels that have to go in urban areas where there are camphor laurels around, and they have really extensive root systems and a lot of biomass below ground. We're poisoning them first, waiting for them to die off, and then when they're starting to get a little bit brittle, your little twigs are dropping off, then they're removed.
So have you guys found glyphosate to be effective with camphor laurel?
Yeah, they're still using glyphosate. Glyphosate's effective with running bamboo. It's a really effective herbicide. There are a few populations within the genetic material, so it's already there, that are glyphosate resistant. And all that means is, again, that one change in that one little group isn't affected by glyphosate as much. They survive. The other thing we're seeing plants bred or manipulated for glyphosate resistance. So you can go through and get rid of weeds out of cotton, for example, because you've manipulated the cotton to be glyphosate resistant. And again, that's not necessarily a big problem. Just short-circuiting the process probably is a little alien for us, but we've been playing with genetics as a human race for at least 5,000 or 6,000 years. The earliest potatoes you couldn't eat in real terms. Nowadays, of course, we have potatoes that we do. The original carrots were purple. Then we decided that they should be orange, so we've gone to orange. We've been playing with the genetics and waiting for things to happen by chance. In this case, these guys are playing with genetics and making them happen. And, if we look at a lot of the things that we test, for example, we test on mice. We do a lot of research with mice because we've mapped their genome. We have in America Jackson Labs. Jackson Labs have a massive collection of mice with all sorts of diseases that don't occur in mice, but they've been able to induce into mice by manipulating so that they can do the experiments and see how they perform before we start with human experiments. Now, you can have all the arguments about whether that's moral or right or whatever, but that's going on and has been to the benefit of the population as a whole. So not everything in life is nice. So does that answer your question enough, Andy?
Yes, thanks very much, Mark.
And definitely, if I had two teratocornis nearby each other, I wouldn't want to go poisoning the stump of one. I think that's tantamount to asking for problems. On the other hand, if it's something like a teratocornis that doesn't sucker up very much, just grind the stump. There's good arguments to grinding stumps, and the good argument to grinding stumps is armillaria is less likely to ever get going on a ground stump than it will be on a stump that's been cut above ground. So good reason to grind stumps, or at least to cover them with mulch. Okay.
In some cases where inoculating them with mushroom spore, camphor laurel stumps.
To try and knock them back further.
Correct. Like rather than grinding them, it's just a bit of an experiment at this point, but we've been inoculating them with the spore of like oyster mushrooms, and we'll return to the trees and knock the suckers off. And we're aware that it could be a very long-term process before the pathogenic fungi, establishes within the stump. But we figure it's worth checking out rather than poisoning our stumps.
Yeah, look, again, it's just trying to find the right product in the right environment for the right situation. They will vary based on situations quite readily. So I don't have any problems with that. I think that's good.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure. Graham says, I've been wondering about chlorophyll fluorescence measurements. What is it? When is it useful? And how would you use the information it provides? It's a good way of measuring the vitality of a tree. Vitality is the capacity of the tree to react to the environment that it's in. So health is how it is reacting. So a tree might have lost all of its leaves. Well, it's not healthy, but it's got lots of stored carbohydrates. Our camphor laurel's been cut down. It's still got huge amounts of stored carbohydrates in the root system. So it's still got reasonable vitality, which is one of the reasons it grows back so readily. And there are lots of trees that fit like that. So chlorophyll fluorescence is about measuring a component of the photosynthetic system that occurs in the light-dependent reactions. And I have a chlorophyll fluorescence meter sitting in the drawer behind my desk. I won't use it. I won't use it because it's just as quick for me to do a IKI test or a iodine and potassium iodide test. That costs me $5 or $6 and takes me 5 or 10 minutes to do, whereas a chlorophyll fluorescence test will take me half an hour or an hour. It means I've got to get access to leaves. So it could even take me longer if I've got to climb. We're going to move magnetic north. I've got to get all the global satellite systems realigned because we're going to rotate the Earth if I get off the ground. And we've got such biodiversity, plant biodiversity, tree biodiversity in Australia that we don't really have good, reliable data or benchmarks yet. Now, you could do it very well if you're talking about looking at nursery stock. And you said, look, most of what we've got in nursery stock, we're limited to maybe 200 species. Well, we could probably fairly quickly get some calibrated data for nursery stock, which means one of the things you could do is take a plant straight off the back of a truck and say, okay, we're going to measure the fluorescence levels. And yes, look, this is a good quality tree that meets standards. So it's a way of testing that is non-destructive. So that's the good side. Well, yeah, you're going to ruin a couple of leaves. That's about it. So, Graham, you're in Melbourne, aren't you?
No, I'm in Newcastle.
Newcastle, that's right. Sorry. I don't know who up Newcastle way has got one. Said I've got one. You're welcome to have a play if you want. One of the things you need to do is calibrate it. And again, you're back into, in my mind, a more complex process than you are with IKI and starch. So starch, the carbohydrate reserves of a tree, are a really good indicator of how the tree is performing compared with a healthy specimen. So you can take a specimen you know is healthy, have a root from it in a couple of minutes. A tree you know is questionable or you're concerned about. But if you're talking about getting stuff off the back of a truck, I've just brought in a pile of trees from Trees Impact. You can measure the fluorescence level very quickly and say, yes, this is something that is what I'd expect it to be.
Yeah, okay. So if you had a tree like a really big old fig tree, would it be possible to have variable results from different parts of the tree?
Yes, it definitely would. You're going to get different results from shaded sides than you are from non-shaded sides. Roots are going to tend to be more reliable, and I'd do a root on a fig any day. The other thing you can look at if you want to get some information that's somewhat meaningful again is near far red infrared photography. And I don't know whether your council's got access to Metro Maps, but Metro Maps throws a near far red image up fairly regularly, once or twice a year, that you can go around and look at trees. And again, it's informative. The healthier the tree, the more vigorous the tree, the brighter red that it is. As it becomes less effective, it becomes paler. And it's something that, again, we use diagnostically. If we've got a client that says, look, the tree's been declining over a number of years, it helps us come up with a point of time at which it started to decline. And, you know, we're looking to see what we can tie in with that event.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And again, if you haven't got access to it, I'm happy to look up a site for you if you'd like to just see what that looks like. But it is telling, and it gets past again some of those things that just looking at the foliage alone is not going to give you enough information. That said, Denise Johnson, Dr. Denise Johnson looked at chlorophyll fluorescence meters and using it as a diagnostic tool compared with, I'm pretty sure it was a 17 or a 19 point check form, and found that there was a good correlation, so that, you know, if you assess visually and use a chlorophyll fluorescence meter, they'll tend to give you fairly similar results. 10-2 is the thing, because the outliers are what we're really concerned with. But my view is, if you're going to do that, buying a $6,000 fluorescence meter is not the way to go. Doing the 19-point checklist is the way to go. And that's things like, are there dead tips? Is the canopy sparse? Are the leaves reduced in size? Are the leaves altered in color? Those sort of things that we'd normally associate with health assessment. Often, if they're persisting, we'll end up with a vitality issue because you're not getting as much carbohydrate reserves. And one of the things that is interesting to see is the aureate formed trees always look as though they're performing worse. But for some of those trees, because they're more drought tolerant, because they don't need as much water, because they don't photosynthesize as much, sometimes that assessment, oh, that tree's, you know, worse, it's a golden robinia, is not a realistic assessment. Sometimes it's actually really in quite good condition, and for a golden robinia in quite good vitality. But we would pick it up with fluorescence, or as with near infrared as being not so good. And likewise with IKO testing, you'd want to test aureate versus aureate, not aureate versus green form.
Yeah, so there's a fair bit in it then, and you need to know.
Look,
really, don't you?
It's an hour's worth at least to do a chlorophyll fluorescence. By the time you've got up early, you've gone, you've got everything ready, you've tested. For me, it's just not something that's taken the short and curly. If we ever get a good data set, that is, if someone goes through and I know that one stage Craig Helen was looking at doing it, of you know, collecting the information on our 100 most common nursery grown plants or trees, then yes, that would be a wonderful tool. But we're not there yet. They are in the UK, by the way. So you know, where Glidden Percival in particular been pushing its popularity, there's probably good merit into looking at that. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I got called out to council in Western Victoria to do a risk assessment on these 4 trees. 3 of them are leucoxylin, 1 of them is Meliodora. They're all within 2 kilometers of each other. They all have multiple branch failures. All failures happened within the last 3 months. We haven't had any crazy weather events. It's been been persistently windy and extremely dry. Not enough information. The first thing that I want to do is cross-section the branch, so a long section, so going up long ways through the branch. But if I look at this, this looks like it's had a prior failure. I don't know whether you can see that there's a darker line there. Why is there a darker line? I suspect that that's a branch that's been trying to fix things up and has failed. So what I do know, Niels, if it's any consolation, is that branch will never fall again. So the risk is actually lower than what it was. Not that that's much consolation, but I don't see any bodies under there on the ground. So trees drop branches. That shouldn't surprise us. What should surprise us
it does surprise the council for some reason.
Sorry?
It doesn't surprise me that they fall off sometimes, but it does.
Yeah. Look, again, we've got a sense of perception. I was just talking with an arborist who's a good friend of mine today, and he was struggling with this issue and trying to explain it to a person, you know, branch fell, it was a near miss, they could have been killed. And my way of explaining it's like this. I have 2 guns, 2 revolvers. One's a 6-shot, one's a 600 shot. Empty. I spin the barrel on the 6-shot, I spin the barrel on the 600 shot, I pull the trigger on each of them. And Niels, can you believe this? In each case, the next shot would have killed you. You're 1 shot off being killed. That's a close shave. Would you agree?
To an extent.
Near miss. Yeah, okay, good. Now I'm going to spin the 2 barrels again. Which one do you want me to pull the trigger on? You can choose. I've got 2 guns. No, you've got to choose one.
600.
Okay, well, otherwise we'll take your firstborn and sacrifice them. Which gun do you want?
600.
The smallest one.
You want the biggest one, the 600 shot, because if I put a bullet in that and spin it, it's only got a 1 in 600 chance of killing you, whereas the 6 shot's got a 1 in 6. So the 600 shot one is 100 times less likely to kill you. So you want to pick the one that gives you the lowest side, unless you've got suicidal tendency, in which case you pick the 6 shot. So what matters is not how close you were to getting killed. What matters is what the real risk is. And the real risk from trees is incredibly small. And it's incredibly small for several reasons. One of them is that the occupation rate in most areas is not horrendously high. Occasionally trees are going to drop a branch. We just have to smile and accept that. It's called background risk. That is, we cannot identify what branch. The alternative was to say then, well, any branch could fall, in which case we need to remove any branch off every tree. And that hasn't got good consequences, because that'll actually kill lots and lots and lots and lots of people. Make sense?
Yeah.
So
the only thing I could see with some of these failures, there was like probably 10 branch failures in total. Is that little black line in the middle, which is probably I don't know, maybe termites?
yeah, it could be. I wouldn't worry about that. I'm more worried about this.
No, I wasn't worried about any. Yeah, but it's just how do I communicate that? Because all the 3 of the trees are on the nature strip, kind of overhanging private property, and one of them is very low target area on a gravel road. But they've all had complaints.
Trees shed. They shed these dead things here. You know, boy, you know, that could kill you in the wrong situation at the wrong time. But going back to my comment, what you need to do is get into a habit of cutting top to bottom along about 500 mils along that base of that failure. and then sanding that up so you can see what you can see. And you'll find regularly that what you've had is a partial failure that's occurred. So a big strong winds come in, things have been damaged, and then it's sat there and it's been trying to fix it up but hasn't been able to, and right condition comes along, things start to dry out and it falls.
Would you have some adaptive growth around that partial failure?
You can, depending on how long it is, Mick. I've got them with some really good adaptive growth. I've got them where I've got 3 cracks. In each case, they've occluded back over the crack and put in a fiddleback configuration, and that crack's actually stronger than the branch, and the branch fails elsewhere.
I see it common with lemon-scented gums, so Citriodora.
Yeah, look, lemon-scented gums get a hard rap. I did some data and presented a paper at Hobart a few years ago on it. That essentially says that in a 1-to-1 occupation rate, which is a pretty intense area, you've got a few bits in downtown Perth that are like that, but most of Perth, Melbourne, you've got a few areas that are again like that, where the occupation's 2 or 3 people constantly there. But you know, most places, then they're not that high, and so where the occupation rate was 1 in 1 or less, Eucalyptus or Crimbia citriodora was posed an acceptable level of risk, so it wasn't something that we needed to worry about. And you know, we looked at failures, including failures associated with microbursts. We have something that just came up about weather in Victoria, and one of the people asked a question about weather, and I will discuss weather in a little bit more detail. So Niels, that fallen bit to me is the critical bit to make a judgment as to why. Once I know why, then you know the system says, well, can I see anything else that's like that? And the answer is no, I can't see anything else like that. Does the risk justify getting some more information? In other words, we look at it and we say, oh, you know, in this particular location, I think we probably need to get some more data. Then you'd do an aerial inspection. And the way I'd handle that is to have nothing underneath and just go halfway out the branch, put your weight on it, or throw a line over, give it a good tug, and see whether the next bit you were concerned about was going to fail. And by the way, it's a perfectly good way to check it on dead branches. And I'm amazed at the number of times you throw a rope around the sort of this end of the dead branch and you think, oh yeah, I'll just break that off. And then you say, okay, no, I'm going to have to climb and cut that off. So again, we have this view that dead branches will all fall on the day that they die. They don't do that. Happy with that, Niels? I know it doesn't give you a precise answer. Get into the habit of chainsaw sand.
So rip it, you're saying?
Yeah, rip it, top to bottom.
Yeah.
So you can look at the top, look at the bottom, rip it for about 400, 500 mils, something like that. Get a random orbital sander or a disc sander, sand it back progressively levels, stop at about 400 to 1,000 grit, and you'll get a beautiful polished finish. And you'll be able to see what's happening. And you know, as I look at this here, I suspect this is a part of the failure process, and this is oxidized, which means this has been going on for a while. This is not just a few days. This is a few months or more.
So you're saying could have been a pretty strong wind event, maybe half a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But whatever it is, it fits in background risk, and background risk from trees is less than 1 in 5 million.
Yeah.
And what would you do to reduce that background risk? In Australian legislation, the answer is nothing.
Yeah.
Maybe if you're in a 5 target zone, that is, if there were 5 targets, always underneath the tree, you might think about doing something. But those areas are rare. Most of what we've got is, you know, 2, 3, 4s, 5s, target occupancy rate. In other words, there's someone there 1% of the time, 0.1% of the time, 0.01% of the time. You know, at that point in time, there's no point doing an aerial inspection.
No.
And, you know, you could go up and do an aerial inspection. I'll give you a great one. There was a tree climbing competition in Coffs Harbour about 10 years ago. They went in, they set up the tree, they put a bell out the end, somebody else went in and played with it and adjusted. And the fourth person that went out on that branch, the branch broke off, and you could see the prior failure once it broke. But nobody saw it prior to it breaking. So good luck.
Yeah.
Happy with
I've
that?
definitely been on branches and they've snapped before.
Sorry, what was that?
I've gone out on branches before and they've snapped on me.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
even though you look at it briefly before you go out, but yeah.
Yeah,
It's
look,
hard,
I
it's
had
hard
it.
to see even from up in the canopy sometimes.
Yeah, and it happens for those of you who are in other areas. Niels is in a sort of Western Victorian area. But if you're in an area like Coffs Harbour, where you are, Andy, up in a rainforesty area, closed forest trees are more likely to do it. They actually have a process of shedding their branches. And so you can be standing on a branch that you think, oh, yeah, this looks good. And the tree's been getting ready for a couple of years to get rid of it. And then we have the real weird one, and that's Wallamai nobilis. The Wallamai nobilis, or the Wallamai pine, has no permanent first order branches. It sheds them all. And that's why it's such an interesting and ugly tree. And it's in fact quite common in that Araucariaceae group to do exactly that. So you'll see bunyas often will shed their first order branches and then grow a new canopy that sort of comes out and down. And that's what gives them that unique sort of penis shape form to them.
That process where trees are preparing to shed their branches, that Cladoptosis or
Cladoptosis, yes, Cladoptosis. They're getting rid of the branch, and some trees do it really well with small branches. And it's really efficient because what it means is they can get rid of a little branch or branchlet and really reduce the risk of infection. So you'll see it in really well in brachychites, in camphor laurels, in oaks. You'll spot it a mile away.
I stood on some spotted gum branches that I thought should be well able to hold me, and yet they've let go really easily.
Yeah, I haven't got a good example of it from spotted gum, but I have a great example from Grandis, and Grandis is closed forest, so I expect it. And you can see where the tree for 3 years or so was working at getting ready to get rid of that branch. It was still functional, but it knew that it was on its way out, and it planned for it to go and to go rapidly with as small a wound as possible. And I
So
think
the failure site's more like a ball and socket, is that right?
yeah, a little bit.
Rather than a tear?
Yes, more like a ball and socket. And there's often swelling at the base of the branchlet if you're talking about small branches. There's swelling at the base that makes it stick out, and there's a conical end to it. So you'll see that where it attaches. Let me see if I can pull up some pictures. I do have a number in the collection. I am working on a new computer, so things aren't always the way that I expect them at the moment.
Have you got a Mac now?
No, I'm not going to be that silly. Peter will say that would be smart, but Peter, by the way, you mentioned a piece of software to me a while ago, and I tried it on PDFs. Do you remember that piece of software?
Not
Affinity?
Sorry?
Affinity?
That's a word processing.
Yeah, it's Affinity is now free, I believe. That whole suite is free.
Really?
Yeah, so
I paid $100 odd for mine.
yeah.
So being free, do they have lots of ads, or
No idea. I just had someone talk to me
how do
about
they
it.
make their money?
So here's Cladoptosis on a brachychiton. You can see that sort of got this swelling at the base, very little attachment. Leaves do it. Leaves are shed cladoptically, but except it's not Cladoptosis there because it's not a branch. And clad is about branch. but leaves do a same abscission process. So lots of trees work through that process rather than hanging on. I don't know why it's not up my database yet, but anyhow.
Mark, is this what Adlington referred to as line of senescence?
No, it's just simply a process that many trees have developed to very effectively shed a branch with minimum risk of infection. And you see it a lot in particular in trees that have really high levels of starches, because it's great to protect that process. Camphor laurels, you go around and pick up a camphor laurel twig, and you can see that swelling at the base and little cone that comes out from the base of it.
All right, thank you. I say it all the time, but I might not have the right term for it. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. And I use camphor laurels because you see them up your end of the world. Yeah, if I spend 5 minutes under a camphor laurel, I'll pick up 20 or 30 little cladoptic branches that you can see that pattern on. Let me see if I can find it on camphor or oak.
Seen it on casuarinas a fair bit. That same shape at the base of the branch.
Yeah, look, it's not, here it is. See how we're getting this sort of little, everything narrows to a point. What happens in the end is the vascular tissue in the middle is holding on, and all of where this was connected to the trunk is starting now to produce corky cells. Corky cells, of course, really good at stopping water loss and stopping infection. So it's just a way of the tree dealing with needing to get rid of that branch. And let's see what images. No. Yeah, here again, that same. You'll see this very regularly. Oaks, camphor laurels, brachychitons, very common pattern. Araucariaceae, all Araucaria branches are the branchlets. Keep in mind that when you go see a Norfolk Island pine, you see those leaves on the ground. They're not leaves, they're branchlets, and they're all shed with this process. And it's amazing when you sit down on something like a brachychiton, it'll shed the branchlet, and 2 days later, it'll have completely occluded with live cells across the outside of that wound. It's actually figured out that that's how it's going to deal with it. The parenchyma has become totipotent, gone in, produced a new bark, and you get this bark inlay very quickly because it's doing it before it finally separates. So worthwhile observing, worthwhile having one or two in your collection. I will find between now and the next time, if Peter reminds me, a really good one of it from a grandis where you can see the grandis deliberately choosing to shed the branch. It's still alive and it sheds it as a green branch. And that's the problem. You can't see it from the external, but it clearly intended to get rid of it.
Why wouldn't it back into the trunk?
Sorry?
Why would it shed the branch green? Isn't that losing carbohydrates and nutrients?
It probably wouldn't have gone when it was green, but when it starts to weaken that attachment point, so when it's just attached with this sort of area here, it's a lot weaker, so it's vulnerable to breaking off at any time. And that's the gamble. Another one you see it with is agathis. Agathis shed lots and lots of their branches at 4 and 5 years of age. A 5-year-old agathis branch is a 50 mil branch, and they just pop them off. A lot of my good samples of Cladoptosis in the collection are from agathis. So yeah, very, very common occurrence. Okay.
All right, thank you.
My pleasure. 2 Angulphra costata. 1 tree has failed center tree in the photograph and root crown. 1 tree with dead root at base and healed lower trunk wound right hand of the tree. Oh, then we've got a tree that's fallen over. Okay. Tree's been injured. Is that clear enough for you guys, or do I need to go bigger? I'll go a bit bigger. Right, so this tree's still standing up, right? It's clearly lost roots here, here, and looks like on this side here too. It's had an injury here. That's a seam. It's almost completely occluded. Here's another one that's fallen over. Lots of roots have been broken and damaged. I don't know, Vicky, not enough information. What I do see is it being very dark here, almost a blacky color. And that's often a response to do with saturation, anoxia, which seems really odd, given that this is a coastal area with a fairly good gradient, which makes me wonder whether there's something like been a leaking pipe up slope from it, and whether that's in what we call a clay lens or a soil lens. So you'll get in these steep slopes, you'll get little pockets of deeper soil. And so just like a pot, they can drain slowly on occasions. And so you can end up with problems if things have been changed around it. What do I feel about it? Trees fail. That's the way I feel about it. I'm horrible.
Because it's the centre one, so the canopy was a little bit sparse.
Yeah.
But it fell entirely across the whole next door property to the north. Didn't fall down the embankment. It fell across the whole property, and part of it was even on the next property.
Yeah, and you know, that always concerns or worries people. The position at law is, did anyone know? And could have anyone reasonably have known? And, you know, I look at a lot of trees and, you know, all that they ever do is make a mockery of me. I look at trees that seem to be dying and I say, this tree is dying, and then 12 months later it's back in full leaf and looking great. I look at other trees and say, that's no worry, and 12 months later it's dead. I look at trees that I say, yep, that's really pushing the limits for the next wind. The next wind comes along, and I can think of a whole pile of them from the 2001 microburst in Richmond, where the trees are still standing up and they haven't failed, even though they're split down the trunk, you know, 2 meters, or had things like that go wrong. And I sit there and think, I don't know.
And the one with the basal wound and the healed wound, does that look okay to you?
Yeah, that looks within the realms of Angophora to me. I mean,
It was pretty solid when I tested it all.
Yeah, and you'll realize that you can get a tree stand upright with just one root. You'll see them on, in particular, cliff faces where a root grows over the edge of the cliff and down and down and down, and it's just one root that's holding it there. Or if you, let me show you the famous one, and I'll spell it wrong. Peter will correct me on this. Pratom. The Cambodian temple.
No, I don't know its correct spelling.
Like Angkor Wat or something?
Yeah. Yeah. This tree here, all the roots are on one side. There's no roots growing up the other side. It's actually growing on the slope. And those roots are just holding the tree up on the slope. It also shows you, in my mind, how incredibly hopeless we are, because this is a 1300s ruin, and they managed to build structures that were root proof, and nowadays we can't do that. So I think it's a good learning lesson, and they're all over that end of the world, but that's just a famous one. That's remember a ceiba, a kapok tree, that's just growing off the roof. I've got shots from the inside to show that the roots aren't going through the roof of the building. They're just on the outside.
It's like a pretty big tree.
It is a big tree, yeah. Yeah, no, it's a good sized tree. If you get a chance to go to Cambodia, it's worthwhile going and having a look. I went there. My father worked in Cambodia for the last 15 odd years of his life under secondment to the United Nations, and I took him back for his 70th birthday, and he took us down to Cambodia, to Angkor Wat, and my wife said, I didn't think you'd be interested. And I spent about 2 hours, she said, around the main ruin. She said, amazing you're still here. I said, I know, have you seen these trees? They're just phenomenal. And they're, you know, to see 300-year-old trees and 200-year-old trees everywhere is just pretty amazing. So it's great arboriculturally, and of course it's fascinating for other reasons as well. So hopefully that answers that question, Vicky.
While you're on that picture there, Mark, we had a couple of trees fail off and some time ago out the back of Kemp's Creek, where whole areas prone for Phytophthora. And I don't know if you can zoom in on that picture you got in your email there. That yeah, the one right in front of you where the blackened roots are. It's very similar.
Yeah, it could be.
And look, I'm only looking at it on an iPad, so I can't see exactly. And I highly doubt it'd be where Vicky had that failure on top of a cliff and whatnot, but it just, yeah.
Oh no, look, it's
resemblance.
It's spread by water, so
yeah, no, I understand. But sort of like, yeah, I suppose if it's damp feet, whatnot, but yeah,
you get it. You know, my big experience with Phytophthora, I think I've shared it before, but I'll share it again, was in Las Vegas on a Wynn Resort. I'd been called in by a transplant company to try and figure out why transplants were dying. I got to the exasperation stage. It was about day 6 of looking at samples, culturing stuff on. I'm pulling my hair out, and I said, it looks like Phytophthora, but you're in the middle of a desert. And so time to call a friend. So I called Tim Johnson out of Arizona. I said, Tim, do you have Phytophthora in Arizona? He said, oh, Mark, it's everywhere. I said, it's a desert. How do you get it? He said, our irrigation water.
Yeah.
Across beside me, there was a massive big irrigation dam on the golf course. And I looked at tree 747 that had died in the golf course. And I thought, oh yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's gone into the irrigation system, and then they were pumping it out. Now the end result of that, and Wynn were fantastic with it, we looked at increasing soil health. We looked at phosphonates to try and reduce the impact of Phytophthora. And so these are things, Vicky, that you might want to think as a possibility. You can get an assay done. You can get an ID done on the roots to see there's Phytophthora. And then
I thought Botanic Gardens weren't doing that anymore.
They're not doing a DNA test. They're just driving me crazy on that. I just had to spend 4 hours doing a comparative anatomy on a magnolia root. Hated doing it, but it's got to be done for that very reason. You can get DNA testing done, but it's now sitting at around $2,000, which is getting on the hefty side. But I was going to say, the end result for Wynn's Resort, and you don't see this, but underneath Wynn's Resort in Las Vegas, there's an underground city. It's 3 stories below ground, the whole thing, you know, massive big complex. And they have in there a plant pathology lab. And I'm pretty sure I can show you a picture of it, but I won't. So it's amazing to think of a casino with a plant pathology lab set up. It's got the lab to deal with the Phytophthora issue. And they employed one of my past students to work there to try and resolve the problem. And now they've got a fairly good grip and handle on it. Occasionally they'll have a better case, but yes, so it could be, Graham. No reason why it can't be Phytophthora. As I said, you've got conditions where it could be getting wet. Normally, if you get Phytophthora in trees, you'll start seeing the canopy thin. So the sort of appearance that you had there earlier, Vicky, of that middle tree.
Yeah, that's the one. It's the center tree.
That's the one that failed, is it?
Yeah, that's the one that failed.
Yeah. So the difference here is there's less crown, so load is reduced. Remember that the number one cause of tree failure of something that's basically upright is wind load, and so the more leaves you lose, the more load you lose. The other side of it, though, is that if the tree fights back, and lots of trees do, you get, for example, Phytophthora fairly commonly. There's a good sample of it out at Richmond TAFE, and the Platanus has got a whole pile of cankers from Phytophthora. Is that some trees will fight back and put on new roots and fight back and put on new roots, but lose woody roots. And again, we really don't have a way of dealing with that. If we start talking about, and you can test, by the way, Vicky, with an ELISA test, which is a rapid antigen. So it's a similar sort of concept. You take a sample and 15 minutes later, you've got the result. The part of the problem with that is if you start doing something for Phytophthora, and this looks like Northern Beaches end of the world somewhere.
No, it's in Carringvale South.
Is it okay? You know, you've got Phytophthora everywhere, where there's been push bikes, where there's been cars, where there's been four-wheel drives, dirt spread. So we've done a fairly good job of urbanizing Phytophthora. So you can test, find it, but that doesn't mean the tree's being debilitated about it. You actually need it from infected tissue to get to that stage. And unless you see an infected root, or a root that's dying off or declining, or an inverted V, or a lesion at the base of the tree, you've got no idea that it's there. Does everyone know what I mean when I say an inverted V, where you get the tissue dying off, particularly in between the roots, called the sinus there? You'll get the fungus will tend to go and take advantage of that area more. And I need to correct myself there. We call it a fungus because that's what it was when I was young, when I was Neil's age. It's now no longer a fungus, it's water mold, and they're in their own kingdom. Having said that, when I was Neil's age, we were still putting plants and fungi in the same kingdom. So I feel sorry for you younger guys, because it changes and continues to change. But yes, and what would I do on checking on that? If I was concerned about it, I'd put a rope on it, give it a tug, see how it moved, or put a tree motion sensor on it. Tree motion sensors are being a little problematic at the moment because the software is problematic at the moment, but the concept is there, and I'm sure we'll see an improvement in the availability of that service in the next 12 months or so.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Okay. Mary Louise Saker, is it, Mary?
Yes, yep.
Yep, okay. Been in the industry since 2001, mainly worked in power line tree trimming side, which I like to call production cutting. Yes, it certainly is. Since there seems to be, I wouldn't say no regard, it's improved markedly in the last 30 years. But it's not as refined as it is in other areas. There's no question about that. So if I can just move this down a fraction, too much. Come on. Just trying to make sure I've got the whole things, because it wants to run on. Okay. No regards for tree health or tree when this work is being carried out. From my experience, do you think this type of work will become more tree friendly in future, or is there any movement now in trying to do better? In urban areas, there's a big movement to try and do better. When you're out of urban areas, it's less critical, and a part of it is things like we don't like lopping or non-nodal cuts or internodal cuts. We don't like that because they can produce rapidly growing new branches that can grow to a reasonable size that are poly-attached. If that's in the bush somewhere and that falls on a power line easement, the occupation rate is so small, it really doesn't matter. So do I think that it's improving? The answer is yes, and I think the general knowledge is improving. You're in the Sydney region or Newcastle region?
Sydney. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. It's certainly so much better than what it was 30 years ago. And 30 years ago, it was just all non-nodal cuts. Now there's an attempt to get close to the right spot, and that's really, dollar value wise, is probably satisfactory. You don't want them to resucker because oftentimes your maintenance cycles will be affected by that, and you don't want that, and you don't want to get clearance issues come the next fire season and all those sort of things. Victoria has really, post Black Saturday fires, made clear that it's not just a job for the knuckle dragging arborist with, 3 holes in the head, 3 eye holes. It's for intelligence as well. So nowadays you have to have several diploma units just to do the job of inspecting the wires. And I think that's, or inspecting the trees adjacent to the wires. I think that's sort of speaks of where the future is. Having said that, I'd say the same is true of tree work in general. In my archives, I've got a form from the mid-90s from Parramatta City Council that says lock tree by 1/3 and gives you a diagram with a tree with the top cut off it. That's in the 1990s. It's when I started pruning trees, my family had a tree business. I went off and started my own. I met a guy who said, there's a good way to do it. A guy called Ulrich Lingerbersens. And then I met a whole pile of guys in America who gave training in that. And I would say to people, I'm going to prune your tree. And they'd say, I don't understand. What do you mean? You're not going to cut the top off, but you're going to prune it. How can you do that? Nowadays, we understand things like directional pruning, gutter pruning, reduction pruning. Although reduction pruning still is a dirty word for many people in arboriculture. It's a real shame. It's a highly effective way of pruning. There's lots of good research that shows that it's a good way of doing it because you're reducing load. There are some problems with it. It does tend to take the tree from being more a dynamic thing that moves around to being a more static thing that doesn't move around as much. But power line work will teach you more about reduction pruning than the average urban person that's doing the average urban pruning work. It's not done anywhere near, and you'll do it in utility clearance because it is a sensible, cost-effective method. So don't hate on the industry, love it, and get involved. The Utility Arborists Association, very active organisation. They're the main plenary group this year in Tasmania, in Hobart. So, they're wanting to share the information. They spend millions and millions of dollars worldwide looking at these issues. So it's not just about, how do we do the worst work? Do you get knuckle dragging, 3-eyed, stand erect guys in the industry? Yes. Anytime you run more than 2 or 3 crews, the quality of your team must invariably start to decline. Because you can get an excellent team and you can deal with an excellent team. You can split them and get 2 reasonably good, if not close to excellent teams. Once you start to manage past that 3rd one, it just is always going to be a problem. So I think when we pick on utility organisations, I think we do so unfairly. If I had to run a crew of 500 or 1,000 or 150 or 50, you're going to have problems. And then I'll say this in great loving, Dave Harris is a great guy. I employed my son for many years until my son became the problem. You're going to have employees that have bad days and bad weeks and bad months. And if you've got 200 guys working for you, spotting that and addressing it early enough is so hard. If you've got a team of 4, you will know about it because you'll have been rubbing shoulders to pick it up early. And building a great utility company is either about production and money or culture. And, Tree Servers, in my mind, has done a great job of having culture as a high priority component. Not perfect, but it can't be because you're dealing with people that aren't perfect. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
And you know, have I seen some horrible work even in municipality stuff? I drive past a tree probably 3 times a week that Isaac Dale over pruned, and I thought, oh, Isaac, how could you do that? How could you do that? I look at it to this day and I say, well, the damn thing's occluding well, it's performing well, it's doing what it's meant to do. Yeah, well, maybe it wasn't as bad as we thought it was. And I think that's something we've got to keep in mind. Anyone else want to throw in a comment or a point on that? Because I think it is an interesting topic. No, silent. So yeah, and career path, I think there's nothing better than getting out and seeing trees. And I'm assuming you're not just doing hands-on stuff, you're also doing the walking around and looking at trees side of it, are you?
Yes, but now I've moved on to a council contract, so we're looking after the trees a bit more. Yeah, from planting them to doing reduction pruning, it's completely different.
So you're based down here in Sydney?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the tree I'm talking about is on Luxford Road at Blacktown, and I sit there and I think, you know, again, it's that learning process, and you'll get so much out of watching and seeing. And I guess the other part of it's communicating back to the team that you will get somebody that rushes it. And I have an involvement with a few companies that I'm close to, and I'll go out on a site, a government site, and do an audit and look at it and think, oh, some really crappy cuts, and I'll relay that back to the team. And it makes a difference to say, look, I don't know what they're doing, the pole sawing. Oh yeah, they were pole sawing. Okay, well, you know, as soon as you use a pole saw, you're going to drop down the quality of your cuts by probably 50%. You can't help it. I challenge anyone to hold a 2 meter or 3 meter pole saw and make a good cut. Yes, David.
I was just going to comment on power line pruning. I was a contract manager for a few years here in Victoria, and it's a tough gig. Like, you know, it's a big turnover of staff because people think, oh, you know, I can cut trees, and, you know, it's hard work. I realise that pretty quick. But, you know, there's a lot of pressure because, you know, you need to cut so many spans a day to make a buck. And then, you know, you've got, you know, they brought in sag and sway when I was there. So then where you were traditionally cutting 3 meters to the side, now you're cutting 6. I found the guys, you know, always tried to cut as good as they could, but yeah, we did some horrible things. There's no doubt about it. But I think, you know, there was quite a bit on. There was pressure there to cut well, because if you didn't, then you had to go back and remediate that in your own time, and the boss didn't like that. So pressure came that way to cut better.
Yeah, and remember, it's not about making a perfect cut every time, and I'll get you in a second, Peter. It's about getting closer to a good cut. So it's about reducing the number of, or the extent to which things are bad. So I often say to people, they say, oh, you know, you know so much about anatomy, you must make beautiful cuts. And I say, if I made a good cut 1 in every 100, when I say a good cut, it's just an ideal cut, I'd be really happy. Most of my cuts are better than they would be without that knowledge, but trying to get it right, we don't have X-ray vision, and so it's hard to do. Yes, Peter. Your mic's
I just wanted to say that Melbourne councils are going through a trial period now where we're reducing the low V clearance from 1 metre to 300. That's going through the same as Adelaide.
Well, Adelaide has lots of trees that are in direct contact with their low voltage, because the leakage is, particularly during dry weather, the leakage is comparatively insignificant. The dilemma for Melbourne and for or Victoria, New South Wales is bushfire. And I don't want to be rude, but does Adelaide have trees to catch bushfires? We have so many. I don't know you do. I don't know you've had some fires recently, but it's just a real problem when you start getting forests that are, you know, 25 to 30 meters high, catch light, and a big slope. And of course the biggest single settlement for a class action in Australia is a bushfire settlement for $500 million. Now that brought a lot of Ferraris or prestige cars and gave a lot of slush funds to several law firms who've then focused on those matters every time they come up. So every time there's a bushfire, there's a law firm saying, well, hang on, guys, we could make, potentially 10, 20 million out of this. It's worth our while spending $100,000 investigating. And I can tell you, they do things like call in a group of consulting arborists to have a look at the things, and they say, like what he has to say, don't like what he has to say. I paid him, so now he's got conflict of interest. He won't be able to, because that's slowly changing. Now whilst I work for a party, that conflict of interest is less controlling on me, provided I give the same information to both parties. The other party can engage me. That wasn't quite the same case going back 10, 15 years ago. So, but yes, they do certainly opinion shop, and they want a nice set of opinions to match what their agenda is. And it goes both ways. On the other side, there's, a law firm, barrister, senior barrister, junior barrister, maybe 3 or 4 solicitors, maybe a team of legal people, depending on whether it's a group action or not. I've been into a motel room in the city with one of those teams and thought, a suite with wall-to-wall books and folders, and people working busily, 12 hours a day. So there is this push to try and ensure that we do protect against bushfire and outages. The other thing that's changing is outages. And that's been complicated now because you're getting the same in Victoria, a little bit in Adelaide, definitely in New South Wales, and definitely in Queensland. There are new transmission services going in, and that's just a whole nother debacle. Because you're running these nice big long new corridors, and these new corridors have secondary issues of fetch. The longer the corridor is in a straight line, the more those edge row trees have issues, and you're getting this push now to get if it can fall on the transmission wires, then it's out. So you get this fall height 45-degree exclusion zone, which is pretty horrid. But it's a price we pay for trying to resolve our energy production to being more green. Okay, well, that's the ones that I've got. Peter, did you say there are any more? Mr. Gray?
I don't think so, Marks, and I'm sure there'll be some more coming. I'm aware of some more that are coming, but as you say, we can deal with them in a fortnight.
We'll deal with them, and please, again, as I said, if it's something that's critical that is time sensitive, you're really in a jam, let Peter know. I'll try and deal with it quickly with you one-on-one, and then we'll deal with it in more detail as a group. I've got some other bits and pieces that have come in the last week or two, but I'd rather be dealing with the live stuff that you're dealing with than dealing with stuff that you're not.
I think the next session's Tuesday the 10th.
Tuesday the 10th sounds right, Peter. We're getting pretty good. So we'll see. We'll see. It's about 2 weeks away. 2 and a bit.
Thanks so much for your help.
Thank you. Happy to be there for you. I'm happy to serve.
Thank you.
Good, thank you guys.
Thanks,
Yeah,
guys.
thank you.